All right, so today's talk on effective onboarding for fun and profit comes from my experience and our company's experience in the challenges we've had both with consulting customers and with our own products in getting people to cross the chasm and effectively use our applications. Because the default position you have when you create a new piece of software is that it's the coolest piece of software nobody uses and no one's ever heard of. And we need to cross that gap and get people to go from that initial experience to being effective users of our application. So when we talk about onboarding, what do we really mean? What's the challenge we're trying to beat? Well, the problem, simply put, is that no one reads documentation or manuals anymore. Or if they do it just in the moment, the last second, when they really have to have a little bit of information, just enough to get into the next step. Potential users make really quick snap judgments about the way your system is and are quick to abandon it if they're not immediately able to get traction and feel comfortable with what they need to do next and the value you're going to provide for their work. They also expect systems to be obvious and approachable. Obvious meaning they know right where to go with things, and approachable meaning they're comfortable with what you're doing with their information as you're going through. They can see the journey and the path you have them walking down without having to open a manual and just trust step by step what it says. The challenge for this as a development team is that we're experts in our system. We know exactly everything it does, why it does that thing. We remember the pizza at the meeting where we had the battle over that feature. And your users have none of that context. They're starting with knowing nothing about your system, and you've got to somehow put yourself back in that mindset and look at your platform anew to understand how to bridge them from there to being at least competent users of your system. In fact, you know that advanced feature you really love, the one you guys sweated out that's just amazingly well thought out? They'll probably never even find that, or if they do, not understand the subtlety and the power of it. It's great that you have it, but none of that matters if you can't get users to at least get to a certain useful point in your platform. So if you think now, I'm just talking about software products, that's not really true. This relates even to enterprise applications or something you might deploy out to a team. And the reason is that enterprise users do have subtle choices. They can oppose migrating to your solution. They can basically just slow down the process of switching from or whatever they're doing now to your new version. They can reject your app entirely and said, no, let's go with some external solution. Clearly, we can't build an adequate product internally. Or they can just badger your team with vague, valueless change requests because the application's not user-friendly or what have you. So enterprise users are, in the end, just another customer constituency we have to win over and onboard into our application. So if we skip these same thinking, even in an internal application, we will end up paying the price. We may not have to go as far because maybe they'll just come down and visit our desk instead of just throwing up their hands and giving up. Or they may have to have at least one meeting with us to explain why our app's really bad before they shoot us. But they can still, at the end of the day, refuse to adopt your application. Your application will then fail. So even in the enterprise, we can't afford to ignore this and just pretend like it doesn't matter. Users will just get up and going on it. So let's talk through the challenge and kind of a metaphor how to approach onboarding new teams into an application. And where I want to start actually is with a genre of development that has mastered this problem quite well. And it's video game developers, because video game developers know more than most that there's nobody going to read a manual and people expect it to be fun and engaging immediately. So they've mastered a basic art of how to get you on board. But the same patterns they use, we can use. So let's take a look at how one video game did this. So we're starting with Red Dead Redemption. And the first thing that they have you do basically is focus on a key adoption path to get some success. This is what we want to do too. In this game, the first screen is just trying to get you to take one action. You're riding a horse. They want to get you to match speed with the guy in front of you. Just one thing. There's only one button they need you to press. They just want you to press the button. That's it. And once they've got you doing that, well then they give you a slightly different action that slightly improves and builds on the last action. Okay, you've caught up with the guy. Now let's go a little bit faster. Cool, we're going faster. Now you can go slower. So we've now introduced a second button. That's right, we've moved our experience level up from one button to two. But you're doing the action, you're learning a thing in the context of the game and seeing the cause and effect of what you've done. You've now picked up those two things. We give you a combination move that combines the two things we just did to actually have a different action. Finally, the thing the game is known for, the thing that you probably read in a review, which is why you want to try the game in the first place, you can interact with the character. They give you one more thing to do. So they've now taught you a third behavior and let you experience that interaction model. So this type of incremental build-up approach is really effective, but notice what it wasn't. It wasn't a fake tutorial. It wasn't just the horse just standing there in an empty field and you had to control it. No, they did all this in the middle of a snowstorm because they're trying to engage you and have you learn how to use the application in the context of the application, the way you're going to use that feature later. So you've now internalized snowstorm, horse, move faster, X. You've learned a key behavior you're going to need to know to have fun in the game. And they did it in a way that you got immediate return and reward from interaction, for example, with having taken the right action. And that hits all of the things that we want to do, believe it or not, in our application. Because what we're trying to do is we're kind of trying to take users from new up through at least basic proficiency with our application. So every user starts, basically at the bottom of this hierarchy of maturity. Now, ideally, we'd always talk about we want to maybe get everyone up to expert, but that's just not likely to happen. Instead, they're starting off here at new, and our initial goal is to get them just up to novice, point where they're remotely competent and can actually execute in some actions. And from there to basic. And honestly, at basic, at this point, most users are getting enough out of your system, they should be, that they're happy with it, and they may never need to do anything more with it. Because 10 to 1, unless you're producing, say, the CAD/CAM software that they're using to design planes every day, all day, or Visual Studio that they're constantly developing in, you're not the center of their life. You're a utility around the center of their life. And so being basically proficient with your application should be good enough for them, good enough for you, that they're getting value out of, and their organization's getting value out of what you're providing. But some small group of your users will want to be able to go beyond that up through proficient and finally up to expert. So you be aware that there are these sort of stages of progression, but in onboarding, we're really just talking about going from new to basic. Going beyond that, you can use different techniques and tools, and even documentation and more traditional training methods to elevate where a user is. So to bring someone from new to basic, that really implies that we have to understand what's it mean for a user from their perspective to be at that basic level, to be effectively on board your application. So let's think about a metaphor. Let's say I want to get a number of people on board a cruise ship. Now, mechanically, you might sit back and think, oh, well, I've just got to get them to go up the gangplank, get them in, and get their stuff with them and get them to a stateroom. And once I've gotten them to a stateroom, they're on board, they're legally on board, they're checked in, and they've got their drink card for the voyage. We're done. They're on board. The problem with that, though, is you've really thought about it in terms of the technical steps you have to accomplish, not the user's goal for being on board in the first place. When a person's getting onto a cruise ship, their goal isn't to get to the stateroom. Their goal isn't to achieve your steps of satisfying the port authority. Their goal is to be ready to have a vacation. They're not on board the cruise ship until they're ready to have a vacation. And now that's a different thing for each person. It could be that for one person, being ready to have a vacation means that they are in their stateroom watching something on the television. For another person, it means they've got their spa appointments booked and they know exactly which club they're going to that night. For someone else, they know which lectures or readings they're going to have through the rest of the trip. Each person's a different thing. That is what it means for them to be ready to have their vacation. But that's what it really means to onboard them into the cruise ship, into that experience, is that they are now ready and set and able to get done everything that they need to do. So that's, and the cruise ships know this, and so they align a lot of things with the way they do announcements and do a number of things to have you get more that first time, right, that first day or in that first hour of you're on board, to get you aligned and ready to have a good time. Because that's what they want, so they get repeat customers. When we do an application, we need to think in similar terms. Not the mechanistic, I'm getting you on board my application for these technical things or these technical things I want to accomplish, but in terms of the difference it will make to you for us having done so. So let's look at some application examples that are in the software industry and not cruise ships. So Twitter. What does Twitter do? Well, Twitter lets you post short messages to the internet other people can see. But what's it mean to do that? It lets you see what's happening in the world right now. Facebook, what does it do? I can see posts and pictures from people I sort of know, often from high school or college, right? What's it mean? You can connect with friends and the world around you. Azure DevOps, what's it do? Store, source, track work items, build applications, and automate deployments. But why do you care about any of that? So you can plan smarter, collaborate better, and ship faster with a set of modern dev services. Or Loop, our company's product. What does it do? It's a centralized logging and error tracking system. But why do you care? So you can rest easy, monitor, find, and fix errors the first time. Everything in that first column is sort of the technical, what's the thing do? The item in the second column for every one of these examples is the key tagline on their web page that is the why you want their product. Because each one of these teams has gone and gotten their marketing folks to come up with what's the reason people would do any of this. You need to know that reason to understand how to tailor that first behavior to get the user from zero to something approaching the benefit of that reason for being there. And if you don't, you may have technically gotten them through the hurdles of your UI, but you've not given them a reason to stay. So with that, let's make an app. Let's see some things in actions and try it out. So let's say we've got our website all up. We have a company called Wiffle. We're the next cool startup. You may have heard of us, and our marketing is really big on it's WIF-LE. So it's all the as any marketing team, they've got the way they want us to message this. So we're going with that. You've gotten to the Wiffle sign-up page, and you click the Let's Do This button. Now at this moment, you have a certain amount of trust in us, in our little trust bar. It's like a little game down here. If this gets too low, the user leaves and you never see them again. They're dead. So we want to make sure we never run out of that health bar at the bottom of the screen. So initially you get a certain amount of health. It's like any video game. You never start fully armored up. And just like that, when someone starts to use your application, they've got to have enough reason to want to click that button, but they're never going to be totally raucously enthusiastic about the journey they're undertaking. So immediately, our marketing team wanted us to collect the world of information about this person before they could create their Wiffle. We've got all kinds of stuff here. We got what honorific, each of their name component. I want to know their favorite pet and color because we might customize something for that later. We have a debate going in the shop about who's the coolest Doctor Who villain. We want them to vote on that and give us an avatar. And then they'll be one step closer to whiffling. If you're presented with this screen right out of the gate, with all of this stuff that your marketing team would dearly love to have, boom, dead. Nobody is filling that out other than the testers and going on to the next screen. It's too deep, too much of an ask, too fast. You can't do that. So instead, we need to figure out how much of this do we really need? I mean, desperately, absolutely have to have, and have to have right now. So let's trim that down. How about this? Let's just do name and email. And we're not going to go first and last and all the rest of that. We're just going to ask for name. Because if you can get away with just someone's full name, it's a lot easier. You don't make mistakes of name parsing, particularly outside of normal, what we think of US Western name structures. And people could type their name very quickly. About the only thing in this case for Wiffle we have to have is their name, because or their email address, because without that there's just no way for us to verify and interact with them. And then they can start whiffling. Now the other thing we've done here is we've tried to combine this with a little other something of cuteness, because we're saying, hey, if you click on this, you agree you're over 16 years of age, and you agree to our spiffy terms and conditions of use. So instead of displaying those, having you check through that, we're kind of just sliding that in as soon as you've established your mark. It's legally okay-ish, and it's something users will just click through. So it's much simpler, maybe a little too simple, but this doesn't cost us much trust. It still costs us some trust, though. I mean, I've asked for your email address, and if I ask for your email address, that's going to cost me something in the trust department. All right, so cool. Now we've done that, though, we need to confirm your Wiffle identity, because we want to make sure we got a real ID there, and you're actually an email address, and you're actually the owner of that email address. So we went ahead and sent you a little email to do that and confirm that. And this is a tricky, challenging bit. I mean, do you really have to confirm their identity right now in the process? From a technical standpoint, it's definitely the right thing to do because we're about to make entries and things, and nobody wants bad data in there. The marketing team's about to get, pinged with, hey, there's a new person that signed up. We really, I mean, business-wise, we really want to be sure this is a high-quality email address. But from a user standpoint, this again is a little bit of a hiccup because what we're going to do is send them out of the app, look it in their spam folder because that's where your email went. And trying to find a code and link it and use that to confirm the account. So there's a couple of other things you could do to make this better, and this is going to cost us a little bit, but it is a straightforward solution technically. I'll talk a little later about what we do to tune this up a bit and make this less terrible. So okay, fine, I decide, you're in the danger zone now, but I've decided I will confirm my WIF identity, and I put in the code, and I click the button, and fine. But now you're not sure if I'm really a person. I've triggered your robot detection, and so now I want you to help my ML algorithm out by picking out image fragments. And at this point, even though I know bots are a real thing, and your marketing team hates bots, and you hate getting bad signups because then your metrics get all wrong, the reality of it is this is super duper duper annoying to users. I mean super annoying to users. And this is basically a death sentence right there. Even if we hadn't just asked for the email address, they're going to hate us. And so, for example, there's a lot of other ways to avoid bots or to segment bots off as a problem. A couple of techniques you can use that are really good if you have a bot problem. One of which is you put a honeypot field on your form and use JavaScript to hide it. And honeypot field is one that has a really conspicuous label like first name, initial password, a name that anybody who's writing a bot is going to look at and say, oh, that's the thing we got to fill out. That looks required. We got to fill that bad boy out. And then what you do basically is use JavaScript or CSS to hide it because bots don't render either of those things. And then look to see if there's any value in the submission in that field because only a bot would fill it in. And then at that point, you have high confidence this is a bot. And or it's someone using a browser 10 years old. And either way, you can't help them. So there's some good techniques you can use there, but what you really don't want to do is get down to this point where you're asking them to click on all the pictures containing waffles, which there aren't any.
But that's French toast.
Exactly. Isn't that exactly your experience every time you get one of these things? Is you're like, well, does that really count? Are you talking about any bread and syrup containing thing, or what are we really counting here?
Well, my personal favorite is the place where there's like 1 pixel.
In 1 pixel, and you're like, yes, is there any waffle in this little, yeah.
They all look like storefronts. Stop that.
Stop it. You could sell things there. People sell things on the corners of streets. I mean, come on. Anywhere can be a storefront, right? Yeah, so it's just a terrible, terrible thing. Don't do this to your users. All right, so we died again. We restore our save point and restart our character, and instead, they're now in the app because we didn't ask them this thing. They confirmed our email address, and they didn't ask, and so there we are. So now they're in our site. They're actually in Wiffle, except that we recognize, well, here's a problem. We have nothing to show you yet. And this happens a lot with applications is, what does the user see the very first time they ever log in? If they haven't set up any data, what do you show them? And how do you get them to do something? So in this case, our excellent marketing team tells them, you haven't Wiffled yet. But one of the things that we have a big initiative on doing is we want to Wiffle with your Facebook friends so we can get them Wiffling with you. And so the right thing here we do is let's connect that up. And we put in, we will ask for your Facebook username and your Facebook password so you can Wiffle your friends. This is a problem on a couple of fronts. One is you've admonished me at the top. You haven't Wiffled yet, but you haven't really given me a reason to Wiffle yet, or I don't even know how to do it yet exactly. So yes, that's technically true, but you're making me feel bad, and I just dropped in the application. And the second thing is asking for my Facebook username, even if it's to do something useful for me, just like this, when we only have danger zone level trust, is dicey. That I don't want to link you in with that. Maybe later, but dude, come on, we just met. So yeah, we're gonna die again.
There's no cancel.
And there's no cancel and there's no any, right? But because our marketing team didn't want it, right? Because they're like, we really want people to hit this button. It's an action we want them to take. So very problematic, initial first page experience. Let's try it again. Restore our character from save point yet again. kick back in here. Okay, so this is a much better piece for a couple of things. Let's dissect what's going on here. First off, I've welcomed you at the top. You, believe it or not, I don't care how jaded the user is, people are hardwired to enjoy being thanked and welcomed in any culture. So welcome to Wiffle, and it's the big and it's prominent, and you don't have to do it all the time, but maybe until you see their first Wiffle, that's what you say. You want them to feel this is a welcome space they can be in. It seems trite and cheesy, but it's shocking how well it works. People want to be thanked. Literally thanked for getting through your Byzantine process and actually achieving the miracle of success that your system worked. Thank you for signing up. I mean, congratulations on signing up. People have to be congratulated. All these things that may seem trite and silly, actually, it goes a long way to restocking that user trust bar a little bit. The second thing we do here is we give you we want you to Wiffle. The one big action we really want you to take is to start your own Wiffle, and we give you a reason to do so. We don't just give you a button that says, new Wiffle, which is probably what otherwise you'd have in your UI. We'd say, enrich your life and the world around you, because after all, isn't that what every .com startup does? And start your own Wiffle. And so that's our big, prominent, big center box until we start seeing that you've done that. It's friendly, it gives you a reason to take the action, but it's not demanding. On the other hand, we've done two other things. If maybe you want to be a bit more of a voyeur initially, you don't really want to start your own Wiffle, we have an option for you right over here. 14 people near you are Wiffling, join their Wiffle. So we've given you a secondary option that you can take on. It's there, it's pretty easy to pick out. We haven't given you too many choices to do. We've gotten you then two other things above that. One is that you actually notice at the top there, we say your profile is 35% complete. Remember, we trimmed that down in the first screen. We ditched the screen where we collected the world up front and just collected a tiny amount of it. So now we create a little gamification action. And there's two bits about the way that that's phrased. It says your profile is 35% complete. And then the button is add a picture to personalize your Wiffle. What's nice about that is, there are a lot of people that if they see a 35%, they're like, what do I got to do to get up to 90, baby? Let's go. They just can't resist it. I also have given you then a very specific single ask. Add a picture, and don't just say add, I'm not just telling you to add an avatar, I'm telling you why. Add a picture to personalize your Wiffle. See, it's like it's friendly. I'm helping you, man. So that is way more likely to get a response on that button click than edit profile will. Even if you think like, well, but behind that button, they could edit all kinds of things. Sure. They'll know that when they get there. But this gives them a reason to want to go in the first place. The last bottom option here replaced what we had done in the previous obnoxious screen, which is connect up to Facebook. We say, want to Wiffle with friends? Invite new Wifflers from Facebook. Same technique. I'm telling you, giving you an aspirational goal. Do you want to Wiffle with friends? And now you know why I want to connect up with Facebook. I don't even necessarily say connect with Facebook here. I don't have to. You can pretty well get, if you click on this, if I then ask you for your Facebook credentials, it's kind of obvious why I'm doing so. You just click the button that said invite Wifflers from Facebook. So now that same question doesn't feel like it's out of bounds, because even if I didn't really intend to do that at this point, because I clicked a button and I'm kind of like, all right, that's sort of obvious. I clicked the thing and you now need to access Facebook. That's pretty clear. It's when you ask for unexpected privileged information that you get hurt, not just asking for privileged information. If they know they clicked a button, if you had a button there that says, give us all your most intimate details, and they click it and you ask for their intimate details, they're not going to ding you for it. They click the button. It's when it's out of sync with their expectations that you lose credibility with them. So this is much better. Now, you got to be a little careful because you can go too far with this. Although in this case, we did well, and we actually increased our user trust level because we treated them nicely. We took advantage of a lot of these social techniques that we know work, even in our business application, those techniques work. But now our marketing team went and got greedy. This screen totally tested well, and like any marketing team, they said, okay, can we turn it up to 11? So now we've got all kinds of things going on because they didn't like that empty space on the screen. So first thing, we have a new app in the App Store, and we got an initiative to get people to use our app in our App Store. So come on, if you want to Wiffle while you walk, you can't do it from your main machine. You've got to go ahead and download the Wiffle from the App Store. We've also got an annual convention called the Wiffle Ball, and it's only 4 weeks away, so we'd like you to get your tickets right now. And we still have the same, call to action down over here, right? And this stuff's the same, but we also have a new relationship with Spotify, and you don't have any of these set up. So if you want to whiffle a happy tune, you can connect to Spotify, and we've added that off to the right. This is a problem because we have too many competing primary goals. You give people more than 2 to 3 choices, and they will add one more choice to the list, which is close the browser, never see you again. You want to control the number of choices users initially have. You don't want to have 0, you're shooting for about 3. 3 is sort of the magic number. And if you have more choices, then ask yourself, can I have a 3-choice thing, of which one of those choices gets them to do 2 to 3 other choices? Because if you keep the domain of selection down to about 3, you get pretty good results. The other problem here is we have 2 sort of long tail goals mixed in with the rest of this. So first off, if they've just come in the first time, don't try to push them either to come to your annual conference or to download the mobile app. Most people will figure out at some point, if they're like, boy, I wish I could whiffle on the go, I wonder if there's a mobile app. And at that point, you want to make it clear that they can look around your site and go, oh yeah, there's a mobile app. Or maybe if they access you from their phone, you can prompt them occasionally and not obnoxiously every time that you have a mobile app option. So you really got to keep it under control. Because other than not, if I come in and again, even if I came in with pretty high user trust, if this was my initial user experience, I'm kind of like, I don't even know what to do. And you feel like a used car salesman just shouting at me. There's too much stuff going on here. So, okay, to summarize then, a couple key tips about this. So you want to avoid a big empty screen with no guidance on the most important thing to do next. I see this happening a lot with enterprise apps. Because in your testing, it's like, well, you log in, there's always stuff there. There's the list of most recent things you did and the list of the other new ones that are just added and your team's top 5 and your favorites and the stuff assigned to you. All those are in there, so it's normally chock full of nuts. But the first time you come in, there's nothing there. So you're just kind of like, what should I do? But you also want to avoid custom initial wizards for common features and instead push them to use the primary UI. Recognize back to the gaming example. They didn't have some custom one-off thing for you to learn the controls of the game. It introduced them to you in the context of the game. So if someone comes in the app, you don't want to run them through a first-time only setup wizard to do things and then dump them back into the application, because the problem is you taught them a method that they're not going to use again. You instead need to figure out how can I make sure that the normal way of doing things is accessible and straightforward enough that they'll be successful using it. And then they'll build up this path memory of how I do a thing. Even if it's maybe not optimal or doesn't handle all possible cases, that's kind of okay. So for example, what you could do is customize the nominal path so it detects things like you're in first case scenario and simplify some of the options. Because then the next time they come in, they'll be okay if you added a screen in the middle of the sequence, because it's still the same button they clicked before that gets them on the path, the same outcome. So, so that works. That flies for them. Also, an interesting side point, which is consider if this is an application designed for groups of people, have an easy way for them to invite other people into their group. I see a lot of apps that miss this off. And so they're acting like, well, everyone's just going to have to go in and sign up. But if you think about it, if I'm the first of sort of my peer group going in to set up an application, or I'm downloading a trial product of a commercial application, my experience of going through, I'm the one who had the high desire to do this in the first place. I took all those steps to sign up for a trial or get the software and install it or what have you. So I'm willing to go through a lot just to get that initial first experience going. But after that, let's leverage that. Let me invite my peers, because the other thing about it is people are much more likely to take an action if someone they trust has asked them to do it. Because you're basically not coming from you having established trust with the user, you're coming from, you're parlaying their trust in the other individual. And unless they're unliked by their entire team, that will go much better for you. So, finally, consider an alternate path for managers or others who can't complete a core path. Again, think enterprise or more sophisticated application. where it could be that you get into an application and what you need them to do is actually relatively technically complicated. Maybe it literally is like in Build Master, create a build, actually do a build and deploy it. And the manager realizes they actually don't know how to build their application from ground up and deploy it. They have PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets for that. And that's okay. You want to make it then really easy for them to invite somebody else. One, invite someone else to do the other work, but two, give them something to do. Because something like 60% of users, if they start a trial on a SaaS application, will never come back after that first time. So you want to maximize what they get out of that first time. And particularly you want to get to the point where they start feeling the joy that you promised in your value proposition. So it could be that you give them, for example, alternate videos or information or training or other things that they can see and do, or a walkthrough or something that gives them something more to see and interact with while they're waiting on another teammate to take the technical actions you need them to do to onboard into your application. So with that concept, let's walk through a real world example. With that set of concepts, we've gone through this sort of mock application, but let me put my money where my mouth is. Here's the actual SaaS onboarding flow that we were using up until about a month ago, and I'll talk more about that, for one of our products. And it all starts with, like anything else, there's a button right there, nice and prominent. Click this bad boy button so you can get going. And so here's our marketing site. We actually have on two things on the screen at the moment, to try it free to get people to start wanting to run a trial. And that gets you to this page. So one of the first things that we did, that we leveraged from what we talked about previously, is we created a custom app layout to focus the user on just the workflow we want. We don't have our marketing branding on here, nor the product branding. It's a clean bridge between the marketing site and the application. Because the two of them don't use the same styles, they use exactly the same fonts for good reason. One's the app and one's the marketing site. They're not identical. So this is almost like has a visual palette cleanser between the two as you bridge it. We also first ask for just the email because we do a ton of checks to see what status that user's in. One of the things is someone signing up for a trial that already has a trial? Happens all the time. You don't think about it, but people remember the path they went to. So we see a lot of people that come back, when they come back to access the trial again, go back and hit the trial button again. So we ask just for that email. We also know from looking at our own metrics and telemetry that a lot of users come here, actually they're just looking to download the latest update. They don't actually want to start a trial. It's the prominent link on the site. And from a marketing standpoint, well, I don't want to have two competing prominent links. But what I do have is a quick exit out right here to give them the ability to download that option and get out of this, basically bail out of this workflow. So if they put in an email address, by the way, then that is actually for a current trial, once they put it in and they click the try button, we basically just move them straight into their trial. We skip through the rest of the process and just send them in. So our goal is to get that email address and then be able to move you to the best place next for you each time. And the app kind of evaluates that screen by screen as it goes, because we're trying to ask you the least and be the least invasive and the most helpful we can through this process. We also did the terms of service right here. You notice kind of in my previous example, we had maybe a bigger sentence. One of the reasons we have to have this is that if you want to do any advertising in Google, there are requirements for a free product that you have, for example, terms of service available within 2 clicks of the ad, basically. Or they will bounce your ad, which happened to us because we had it on a following screen. And so, that's why my marketing team doesn't want to have that here. We want to have it later. But, sometimes you just got to please the man. So let's go ahead. Let's say that they give us their email address. And what we then do is basically, if when they go to click try loop or do anything that loses focus the email address, we actually run out and do a validate quickly on that. We do a ton of things about that email address behind the scenes. We're going to see if it's we go to see if it already exists. We go to see if it's valid. We actually run a score on this thing. So if you've ever gathered public email addresses, you know that people lie all the time in their email addresses. There's a company called Mailinator out there that is the king of creating trash email addresses, basically, that are valid, can receive an email, but are throwaway. It's not linked to anybody, nothing you have to set up ahead of time. we basically discard all of those and have alternate paths for people to give us that information. That's nice, but it's an alternate path. So if you put an email address, we go out and we run it against a web service so we know it's valid, we know if it's a corporate or personal address, we know if it's a free account or not. And the probability it's been used for fraud in the last 90 days. And depending on that score, we take different actions because I'm trying to keep things as nice as possible. One of the things we do is if it comes out as a company address, we fill in the company name field from the information we get back from that email address. Because for our internal systems, we really want to have that company name for another reason in a second as well. But I hate to ask it. If I don't have to fill in, if it make you type in the field, it's just better. I'd like you to just be able to almost just click next and get all the way there. What's that?
Isn't that kind of creepy?
Haven't had that people interact with that. People thought it was it's sort of obvious and clear to them.
I would kind of be creeped out if that happened.
It's interesting feedback. So if they put in a company address, then we fill in the company name from that, and they see it pop in. Then, if they're tabbing through it, they obviously can change it and overwrite it. So it's clear what we're doing. We're just defaulting a value.
Do you just parse the email address, or do you actually go look?
So we've actually done it two ways. We've parsed the email address, and we've gone and grabbed the corporate records, the actual ownership for the domain. That we got some negative feedback on. So we actually backed off and went back to just basically grabbing the part out of the email at the domain. Yeah, because the problem is a lot of times that the company names for a lot of these things are kind of weird, and they're in the registrar database. They're like the weird parent company. You're like, that's not me. So we stopped. Even though that was more technically clever, we stopped doing that.
It is very clever, but that's what I thought you were doing.
Oh, no.
That's really creepy.
Yeah.
How do you know what company we're
Right.
Okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah, and again, it's astonishment, right? It would feel like an astonishment invasion of privacy, even though that stuff's public information. People don't really realize it is. So no, we don't do that. We're just trying to minimize it and give you a plausible thing to get through the form. Now, if you score low enough, not in every case. If you score low enough, you do get our little validation code thing. So you get this if it's not a disposable email address. It is a free address, and basically the trustworthy number is under, I think, 60%. So that usually ends up hitting personal email addresses, or mostly hits personal email addresses, or small companies hosted at GoDaddy, that kind of thing. In which case, we actually send them a thing. There are some other exceptions we do. We have a hard-coded list. Basically, any Fortune 100 email address will always get this. And the reason is we want you to prove you are that person. I don't want someone signing up Scott Hanselman on our site, except Scott. You're welcome, Scott. You can totally sign up. But anyone else, you need to verify you really own that address for us to let you roll on through. Now, we do a couple things to make it better. We show you the email address really clearly that we sent the confirmation code to. We make it easy to change that because people do get that all the time. Easy to get another code right on this screen. And it's those small little UI bits help people correct it. We also have, though, because we've seen, and we actually have metrics and all of this, so we can see that this doesn't really stop and block people. They're okay with this part of the process. We also have this little guy here, our intercom widget, that pops back in there as sort of a safety feature. Again, if people are uncomfortable, aren't sure what doing, that's there for them to start a chat with us. But it also means we can actually see the abandonments at each part of the process and what things they left blank if they bail. So we use this to really intently monitor this bit, and we've used it to try to hone down how many cases we actually ask them for this. Now, if we do ask you for this, you get this plain text email. There's a couple things about this email that are very particular. One is that it does not, although it shows two links, that's just Outlook colorizing it. There are no links in this email, and it's not HTML. And the reason is that an email with no links and no HTML almost never will end up in spam, as long as it's more than a certain number of characters. Because I'm not giving you anything to click on, and I'm not doing anything that could pull external information. So it just doesn't look like anybody's spam request, and that was pretty deliberate for us. And instead, what we've done is we put the code right there in the middle on its own thing with tons of white space around it. So no matter how ham-handed you are with the mouse, you can copy paste that. We don't use a link, and one of the biggest reasons we don't use the link is that if you click the link, where's that link going to go? It's going to go into your default browser new tab. That's not necessarily the same browser you're using to actually run the trial, sign up. And best case, it's the same browser but on another tab. Worst case, it's the system, it's your company's approved default browser that you hate and never use. So instead, we just went with this approach, and we actually got a drop in problems signing up in this stage by doing that. By about 20% of people just running the little glitches. And they're running the little glitches because they ended up with two windows in different states, and then the two windows kind of got confused, so they went back to the other one and of where it was in the process and things like that. And the engineers were sort of like, well, we could correct all possible things by like hard pulling the server and doing all this other stuff. And it's like, no, let's not do that. Let's make our life simple and easy. Let's just have them paste in the code. And we also eliminated, less than half the people see this page because they fall into the category we trust the email and they're not high enough. It's not an email address high enough on the list that we're going to make them hard validate it. That said, this validation is going to be gone in our next iteration because we found another way to accomplish the same goals but at a different point in the process. We had to do some significant engineering to make that happen. We decided it was worth it. So after I put in the confirmation code, by the way, one of the things we do here is we strip all leading trailing white space, we uppercase it if it's lowercase, do all these kind of things so that if you're in fact, you could literally copy and paste the entire email from the other screen into that text field, and we would go, yeah, it's this is the code. We're trying to make it almost impossible to mess up entering that code into that. Because it's really easy when people are copy pasting extra garbage characters and stuff like that, and you don't want it, although computers are very literal, you don't want it to mess up this process because you just want to have some evidence they received your mail. So, all right. After they've done that, then we set up their username and password. We default the username to the email address that they've just given us. They can change it. Some people get touchy about that, so we debated whether we would even allow them to modify this or not. Give us a password. Subscribe. The option to subscribe to stuff to our newsletter. That used to be checked by default. It's no longer checked by default thanks to GDPR. Because we have a significant non-US presence, and you can bet with the legislation moving through California, GDPR is going to be a thing for everybody soon. So, it's just might as well be GDPR friendly from the get-go. Now, our marketing team made a good case to me. This one went back and forth a couple times that they wanted first and last name. The reason that they wanted the two separate is that there are marketing stats that show that personalized emails addressed to people's first name get a significantly higher response rate. So we actually do ask for the breakout, but to avoid getting garbage, this is an interesting little thing we did. We added this badge here that says, this is how your display name is shown in loop, and we added it in there, and it actually, you can't quite see on this projector, but there's their username, there's their first and last name, and there's an avatar. And we actually do go to Gravatar, like the app does, to pull avatars in for that automatically. If they're available. What we found is that people love to see their name on a name badge. So our rate of getting ASDIF, and other garbage in those fields went essentially to 0 when we showed them, here's how it's going to look in the app. Because they didn't want their name badge being, hi, I'm ASDIF. They actually would rather address them in something they found. Now sometimes they will make little jokes, but you know what? That's better. At least when it shows up on the email to them, they'll know exactly why that is, and it'll be funny to them. So I'll take it. Now, the other, again, GDPR compliant, this little paragraph text. As part of your trial, we'll send you some helpful information on how to use Loop and what your options are to keep using Loop after your trial ends. You can opt out of these messages at any time. This is my GDPR consent for the DRIP campaign that they're going to get signed up into as soon as they click next. During the trial. Because as with any trial, we know that basically we want to be able to send you communication to let you know that your trial is going to expire, to tell you about case studies, help you along the adoption path to go from that novice user to basic. We want to help you along that journey. And to do that, we need to send you some communication. To do that in Europe, we need to have some informed consent. So to get that informed consent, we've added that little guy right there. They click next, that's going to happen. All right. And then finally, we get to the actual create a service page because you're actually allocating a whole system. In our case, you're creating a tenant, it's in our whole platform. And here we have this is what we used to originally have. By clicking create my service, you agree to our terms and conditions of use. So we initially just had this in, and Google said that wasn't good enough. because it was too far in. But this actually is our legal e-signature moment. So we actually capture this as our moment where you have established, anyone who's dealt with e-signature log, right? So you've established a mark, you've established an identity, and now we're asking you to sign a thing. So we can actually record off for GDPR purposes and for other purposes that you've agreed to that, which if you click it would pop up as a dialogue, basically. We don't want to kick you out of flow at this point. So that's this little guy down there. And
Did you ever show like a progress through all these steps?
we didn't, because the number's variable, and frankly, although it looks like a number of steps, we actually have two different versions of this. We did one where we did it as a single page and just laid down the stuff as we asked you. And we have another one that did it this way. And we just basically benchmarked which one got better results. And it turned out the one that laid out the steps this way got better sign-up results. And at that point, we didn't want to tell people this could be 5 steps. So there's really no upside to that. But there is a little bit of language to it. You'll notice that the term we use on the buttons, this we actually did benchmark a little bit. And at this point, we get to the point where we literally say, create my service. So we almost felt like if we've pushed you pretty far to get to all this point, and this language is pretty clear. You click this, we're creating the thing. Yeah. So the language started with try loop, and then it had next, and now it says create my service. So we've sort of done that to show you the bounding boxes of it, and bench check that. Now, it takes us a second to create your service. What we're doing behind the scenes is we're actually allocating resources. We're creating databases and initially populating them, things like that. So it can take, depending on Azure's mood that day, between 5 and 20 seconds to happen. And we didn't want people like wondering what the heck was going on. So what we did was we actually inserted in this page two things. One is we've got our little, I'm not quite sure, animated progress thing that's sitting here going and roving to show you like we're thinking, because people like visual feedback. But while they're waiting for that, we actually walk them through a 5-stage little screenshot and text down here that shows them what a good trial looks like. So we're conditioning to them to what they're going to do during their trial. This happens to be the last screen of it, but it starts off with basically like, first you're going to need to do this, then you need to do that, then you'll be able to see this, and see this, and see this. And it basically sequences through those things while it's waiting for it to pop up. So we're keeping their interest, and actually we've incorporated this almost into the start of our true application onboarding because we're showing them what's going to happen as they go. Ironically, that did create a little bit of an issue because we used to just throw them into the app as soon as this was done. But then we got complaints from users saying, where did I miss the tutorial? So instead, what we did was, when this bit's done, or when it's done actually creating the service and it's gotten feedback from the back end that that's all complete, we just changed the top. Your service has been created, go to your service. And the rest of this kind of keeps it sequencing so that they now can take that action at any time. And again, this is why you got to be careful when people argue. Anything you get from user feedback that says, oh, you have to be in the upper half of the screen, or you have to have the fewest possible steps, or whatever. Those are interesting starting points in the service of a mission, but what you really want to do is think through things very carefully, then have telemetry to tell you how you did. And we metric each step of this process to know if we're losing people, what rates, which points, what inputs did they have when we lost them, so that we can change and improve that process. Because in the end, real data trumps theory every time. So once they click that go to your service, now they're actually kicked into our application. They don't have to log in again. We've pre-logged them in that first time, pre-authenticated it. We've got it going, and they're on this screen. Their name's up here, so they can see that it's them. If they were to bookmark this page, they can come back to this all day long, and they're good to go. Now, the challenge we have at this point is we need them to do something fairly technical, because Loop is a centralized log and alerting platform. It's kind of technical getting on board. And what I need you to do, what I desperately need you to do, is basically add our agent to your application so we can start getting telemetry from it. So pretty much, you drop in, we show you right here, like, okay, we need you to take these set of steps to get telemetry flowing, and click your application type and get the details of exactly how to do it. And we've customized this so literally, like the configure page has things for your exact configuration already populated into it. So everything's copy paste. And this gets that moment again where I talked about, like, if let's say I'm a manager because I'm the one who decided, hey, our team needs real-time alerts and we need centralized logging, let's go get a system for that. I get to this screen and 10 to 1 I'm realizing I can't do that. And if you can, fantastic, right? You're perfect. But we know a good, I'm going to say 40% of our people that sign up for a trial realize that they can't actually modify the source code of their platform enough to add a library and do a build. So we have this really prominent invite a user option right here where they can fill in an email address. And if they do that, they get a custom tailored introduction email that says, basically, Dave Wiffle has asked you to help him try out, or actually, and we avoid gender pronouns, so I'm not sure how we would phrase that. But basically, Dave Wiffle's invited you to help set up Loop. A little bit about what Loop is. Loop is, blah, 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 blah. Click here to complete setup your account. So it actually comes across as, can you help your buddy out? We explain what the thing is you're going to, and then help you get started. You only get that version of the message if you're in this mode where there's no data in yet. Because otherwise it would be weird. You're not helping set up, you're just inviting me into a system I need to use. So once we get data, we actually generate a completely different version of that message. Again, it's a little bit of being aware, but using the same process flow. Because that invite user button's there for the rest of your life of the application. But we use a different flow in the case where you haven't sent us any information yet. So let's say you go through that, you invite somebody, you invite Wibble at ipona.com to help you set it up. And you sit here just looking at this screen. Well, as soon as any application telemetry comes in, boom, we change the look of this screen to actually show you the dashboard of, okay, we've started receiving information from your application. We've seen 17 errors to review, and here's the latest information, so you can see something that's actually interesting right off the bat. But we've added in this one bit, which is, even though we've got the latest information going, here is that incremental help I talked about. Here's one action I want you to take. Now that you've done this, here's one action I'd like you to take to get more out of out of our software. We have a set of these guys that show up here when we detect basically that you're just dipping your toe into the system. And you can dismiss them so they go away, but we say, hey, we see there's only one version. Loop really likes version. We tell you why it matters to us. They give you links and things to do or what you should do to optimize that experience. As soon as we see that you've done this, that's cool. Then we give you a different prompt for the next value step up. Now, by the way, the app doesn't actually grade these bits. I'm doing that just to call it out in the slides. But the idea is that at each point while you're initially onboarding with the application or initially getting your team to use it, we're helping you see the next most useful thing to do, one thing. Now, you could always just explore the app and ignore us and do something totally else, but we'd like you to know that what we think is the next one thing. All the way through basically the set of stuff that we feel is the core to get you from that novice to basic team, basic user of the system, at which point that goes away. Now it's always here under Quick Help. You click on that, you see all the same stuff we just showed you. But now we don't put anything in the screen because you've gotten over all those hurdles. You've given us something for each of those points and gotten on the other side of that. So there's a pretty quick example through of onboarding into an application, applying in the real world the concepts we talked about in the first world. The last thing I want to emphasize about that, though, is I mentioned that, I said this is what was true up until 2 months ago. One of the things that we do every 6 months is we step back, basically clean up some stuff and create brand new people, and as a team, walk through the onboarding again. Every time we've done that, we've seen something that's like, we can make that better. I know why we're doing that. I know what the argument was last time, but circumstances have changed. We either have new information or new tricks or techniques, or the software's changed. We can get down to limitation. So let's kick that can down the road, or let's change the flow of that item. That's the thing that stands out as the thing we're doing now that's unreasonable. Let's sand it down. So it's continuous improvement is probably the most important aspect of this experience in this process. So to summarize then, so users will tire of a system, actually nope, I do not want to get through this bit. Sorry, let me skip over that section, get to here, bringing it all home. Okay, so success is defined in the end by the change experienced by your users. That's what success means to them. So just like we talked about getting on a cruise ship, it's not about technically getting some of their staterooms, getting them ready for a vacation. With your application, success is going to mean not the technical things they have to do to get set up in your application, but instead the user experiencing the goal of why your application is there in the first place. So you need to focus on bringing users from wherever they are, technically or personally, to that first success, for them to feel like they're really on board with the application. And along the way, you've got to manage that trust budget. Think of it like that lifeline. You can ask things. Sometimes you have to spend trust budget, like we did, to ask them, for their company name. And sometimes you do new deposits into that trust budget, like providing timely, useful guidance on how to use the application in certain key moments. And finally, routinely review your initial user experience, because each time you go back, you'll probably see a new thing that now you're willing to make the investment for. As a product company, we spend probably, I want to say 35% to 40% of our UI budget annually on the initial user experience. Both reading metrics, digging through it, having fierce debates over what we can improve and how, and then making those technical changes. If you'd like to go deeper than what I did today, there's a cool website you can go check out. It's got really fun examples done by a gentleman, Samuel Hulick, who's actually based right here in Portland, amazingly enough. Useronboard.com, www.useronboard.com. One of the most fun things he does is he has all these teardowns of different initial user experiences annotated. Some of them are hysterical. The Ashley Madison one I highly recommend. It is a treat. So with that, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of InedoCon.